Well, City Power says it's still trying to clear the power outage backlog across Johannesburg. According to the Department of Environment and Infrastructure Services, the backlog was brought upon by torrential downpours and cable theft. MMC for Environment and Infrastructure Services, Michael Sun, joins us for an update on this issue. Michael, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us on our program this morning. Now, last year, around early December, you guys were looking at around 5,000 reported calls from residents having to deal with power outages. Where are we now?
Good morning, Kokoza, and compliments of the season. A Happy New Year. Yes, indeed, last month we were in fact dealing with over 5,000 of the open calls. But bear in mind, many of the calls are duplicated because these are area outages. We're able to bring them down to about 2,000 calls. In fact, we made tremendous amount of progress last week to bring about 2,000 down to 1,084 calls. But unfortunately, over the weekend, we had another spike. So we're looking at about 1,900 outstanding calls as of this morning. And what is also very concerning is that out of the three areas, your Hearst Hill that affects Mayfair, Rutherford, and Florida had area outages due to cable theft. And then we're looking at another area of Lenasia where the mini substation was vandalized. So these area outages certainly were not only to do with the weather, but also to do with theft and vandalism.
Yeah. These specific areas, Hearst Hill, Rutherford, Lenasia, you have identified as hotspots, so to speak, with regards to vandalism and cable theft. How is the city responding to this? Because, of course, this is an ongoing problem. It's nothing new. But surely you need to start responding in a manner that doesn't, adversely affect the city's residents.
That is correct. Rutherford, for example, has probably the oldest network in the whole city. And added to that, when there's load shedding, cable thieves and vandals are hard at work at probably the easiest and safest time for them to steal cables and so on. So what we've done is that already last year we've intensified the security measures by deploying additional security forces on the ground, but that is obviously very costly for City Power. We've gone to engage with the private sectors, such as your CPFs and community patrollers. And from that, we've, in fact, seen double the amount of arrest of cable thieves compared to the previous year. So certainly we are making a lot of progress. It's indeed that only through cooperation with the private sector, not to forget our law enforcement agencies, the police, JMPD, also plays a major part. And also big thanks to the private security service that's assisting us. But we'll continue. One of the new initiatives that we'll be implementing this year is some of the new technologies. We are looking at some new tech cables that will disintegrate once cut and damaged. So it will become useless to the cable thieves. We need to have a better security around the substations, your mini subs, and that within City Power, our engineering at research development unit is certainly working very hard on some of the new measures to protect our infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, we're currently sitting on stage 2 load shedding, but we know that energy terrain is one that's ever changing. Any day due to one or other trip at some power station or, the removal of some other generating unit can cause these stages to increase. How does that affect your work as City Power, as the City of Johannesburg, to try and keep the lights on for your residents, even outside of Eskom's load shedding schedule?
Well, the load shedding is really terrible for any grid, not just in the city of Johannesburg. Firstly, when there's no electricity in the network, our technicians can't work on the faults. So that's one of the biggest delays that we experience in terms of technical operations. Secondly, is obviously I've mentioned earlier, cable thieves are at work, especially during load shedding. And what's also very important is that the network old, and in those days when they were designed and built, was never to withstand this kind of on and off of electricity. So it creates a lot of faults in the system. And some of the areas I didn't mention, when I started to speak to you earlier, is that the rush in current creates a lot of faults, especially at our substations and switching stations, that causes tremendous amount of damage to the network. So added to that, we have a situation where we are not only facing the weather, we are facing the criminals, cable thieves and vandals, and then of course we have to deal with load shedding. But that is all something that we need to face. We've learned valuable lessons from the previous recent rains and floods. City Power is certainly prepared and geared to deal with that. And I think, starting with January, it will be a month of speedy restorations for our residents and customers.
Michael, I have to say I'm curious about what this is costing the city. I mean, the plethora of challenges that you've brought to our attention, I mean, it's aged infrastructure, yes, but you're also dealing with vandalism and cable theft. You're also dealing with the after effects of load shedding. What is this costing the city to help keep the lights on?
The amount is really astronomical. Although we've allocated a sufficient budget for this financial year to replace, maintain, and even build new infrastructure. But let me just share with you a number. A mini substation will cost City Power anything between R500,000 to 600,000 Rand to install. And we often have vandalization of these mini substations because of the copper component within. So at any given day, we could probably wake up with 2 mini substations being vandalized, and that would be R1 million, in the morning. Never mind the cables that we have to replace, the switching stations, your other infrastructures on the street lights. Yesterday I was driving on M1 just to take the Marlborough turn off. I saw 4 traffic lights be sawn off from the bottom, and only to steal copper, I can assume. And those kind of vandalized infrastructure and theft really cost the city, hundreds of millions of rand every year. It's something that we need to put a stop to. We are looking to national and provincial government, law enforcement agencies to assist us. City Power is a provision of distributor of electricity. Lately, we've become a provision of security services, which is not our core business. But it was something that we have to deal with to ensure the integrity and the safety of our infrastructure network.
All right, look, you've managed to bring those reported calls down to just under 2,000. But we did receive a weather warning on January 1st, in fact, from the South African Weather Service. Some rains expected in the region, nowhere near what we saw in early December that led to some of that localized flooding that we witnessed. How are you preparing for the sort of effects of the rains that are expected? Because as we know, your technicians can't go out and attend to these outlets in the rain. That's likely to start perhaps even increasing that backlog that you had already started to decrease. So what is your response to the upcoming sort of weather update?
Well, some days we really wish the weatherman was not correct, but when they are, for example, as the last torrential rain and floods, we have now identified hotspots. Areas like the Florida Lake in the Rudaput area, Peacock Street in the Newzroom, where there was a flood of blocks of homes for many days. So these areas have now, topped our list for hotspots. We certainly have taken our precautionary measures in these areas that if there's any signs of a flash flood or heavy rains, we'll be prepared in those areas. But we still need our residents to be very careful because weather is very unpredictable, especially with the floods. We don't know where the water is going to go. As much we'll be prepared for, we certainly would ensure that these resources around across the city would then react to the most devastated areas in the need of restoration.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us on our program this morning, and of course giving us that update on the progress made in responding to those power outages. That was MMC for Environment and Infrastructure Services in the city of Johannesburg, Councillor Michael Sun.